I ended up going to Columbus and meeting some great people,
Yeah.
right, that are still in my life, that are actually helping me along my career. So if I hadn't made that move, right, then I would have potentially missed out on opportunities for me and my family. So I think that's part of it too. Is that there's a blessing in everything. If something doesn't go your way, all right, what's the perspective, right? What's the positive in the situation? And I think that mindset helps push things along,
Yeah.
in things I do and things we do.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Matthew Chow, and I'm Chief Mental Health Officer at TELUS Health. I'm a physician, and I specialize in mental health. Today, I'm interviewing Ricardo Clark, the Whitecaps football club second team coach. I had a chance to just chat with you a little bit outside about your own, professional career, the experience that you've had, and the pressure that faces, young players today. Maybe we can start with that, because today we're going to be talking about mental health, and mental health and pressure are kind of pretty tightly linked. So maybe let's talk a little bit about the pressure your players feel and what that's like. Maybe you can describe that to us.
Yeah, I think the pressure. I think that the pressure to perform, obviously, is something that I've noticed some players experience. Right, the pressure to perform in order to be a professional soccer player. Right, obviously, on some level, only a certain amount make it. Right, I think back in the day they used to say 0.001%.
0.001%.
Make it.
Wow.
Some crazy stat like that. So obviously not everybody's going to make it, right? So, and I think a lot of these kids understand that, right? Especially as they get higher and higher up the ranks and they see some players sort of drifting out and some players actually making it, right? And then, again, the pressure to actually make it and to perform in the moment, I think is something that I've noticed some players struggle with.
And you've experienced that pressure yourself personally, right? You
Yeah.
played professionally for 15 years. What was that like? Like, how did you cope with that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pressures, that I experience, right? Where it's a pressure to perform, to make it, to be a professional soccer player, to have a successful game, whatever it is. I think in regards to like my path and how I became a professional soccer player, more times than not, I wasn't really focused on that end goal.
Yeah.
Yes, I wanted to become a professional soccer player, but for whatever reason, I was more focused on the day to day, right? In how I was becoming better, in how I was training every day, in enjoying, I guess, the process, but enjoying the moment because I always loved the game, right? Yeah. Again, that probably wasn't how I was every single day, but I think more times than not, that was kind of my approach to the game and hopefully being the best player I could be, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's focus on that, because it seems to be like a superpower there, like focusing on the day to day, right? Instead of just the big end goal and worrying about like the 0.01% or 0.001%. Like, so tell me more about like how'd you decide that the day to day is what you would focus on? What was important to you?
Honestly, that's a good question because to some degree I felt it came natural.
Yeah.
Right, and maybe it was just part of my upbringing, part of the influences I had in my family. Thankfully I had an older brother. Thankfully I had a father who sort of gave me fairly good guidance, I say, and all that. And I think, for one, having faith, right? Having faith in the fact that, there's my father grew up very religious,
Yeah.
right? Went to church every day, encouraged us to go to church, and established, I would say, a fairly good foundation for me and my family. As I got older, obviously, I try to find my own truth, and maybe I don't carry the same exact beliefs as my dad, but I say there's a fairly firm foundation there. I would like to think so. Relatively good foundation, right? Of having faith that, whatever happens, whether it's good, whether it's bad, maybe there's a higher purpose to it. Maybe there's something there that, how do I explain this? That is in some ways out of your control, if that makes sense. So yeah, with all that, I think so long as you're putting the energy in a good manner, in a good way, right? I think you can be at peace with what happens, right? And I think ultimately that's what mental health can be about, being at peace about what's going on in your life, whether it's good, whether it's bad, but also being in the moment. I think that it kind of wraps around to maybe those two things for me that help me sort of focus on that day to day to reach that end goal, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. I think you're sharing some really critical points about mental health. So I'm a mental health doctor, right? And I've treated thousands of people with mental health conditions, and so that's one way to deal with mental health is through treatment and therapy and counseling and things, and that's certainly something that TELUS Health does. But what you're talking about is really important too, because I heard you talk about a bunch of different things, like having a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I heard you talk about that. I heard you talking about spirituality and faith.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? For a lot of people, that's a really critical part of mental health,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is having something to believe in, something bigger than yourself. It sounds like that was important in your life, and maybe that's changed and evolved over time, but it still sounds like it's something that's there for you and is important for your own like well-being. So that's great that you've shared that. Can you talk about a time when maybe you've had to help, a player, a colleague, a team member, go through a tough time, with their mental health, and what you did to try to support them?
Yeah, I think on a number of occasions, like I mentioned before, there's the players feel that pressure to perform because they want to make it so bad.
Yeah, it's it's a heavy weight, isn't it?
Yeah, and you could see sometimes in their performance, whether it's anxiety, whether it's nervousness, they're stressed in moments that it takes them away from the ability to perform how they want to perform. I'd say, a couple players come to me, they come to other coaches for advice, in what they're dealing with. And yeah, we try to coach them the best we can in regards to their mindset, right? And like we talked about before, it's doing the best we can, doing the best they can, like we mentioned before, just to focus on that day to day and the process of it. And I think for them, it's about balancing, okay, yeah, we do have an end goal, we have that in sight, but also the steps that it takes to get there, right? And you don't get too caught up in this, right? And you focus on this, the process and the day to day, and just making yourself better, as a player, as a person, right? To hopefully reach that end goal, and also being at peace with the fact that, okay, if I've done everything I can within these steps and I put in an honest effort within that, I can be at peace, or they can be at peace that whatever happens, right? But so long as they're putting for the most part, the right type of energy into everything, that's all they can do at the end of the day, right? So I think that sort of mindset is what I try to encourage in the players.
You mentioned a couple of words I thought was interesting. You talked about anxiety or feeling nervous. Mm-hmm. Do you think people are more willing to talk about that kind of thing these days? Because I know, when I was going through medicine, people didn't like talking about mental health. Like, people were actually embarrassed sometimes. Sometimes they felt really ashamed. They didn't want to look weak. They didn't look like they couldn't perform. Like, do you think that that's changed over time?
Yeah, I think it's changed. Credit to people being honest about how they feel, about people like everybody right here bringing awareness to it, which makes it almost like a, I don't want to say trend, but just makes it more acceptable to talk about it, to be open about it. So, I feel like personally I grew up in a generation where, in an environment where, you just have to get on with it, which is good in some ways, but maybe detrimental in some others because you're probably less open to, like you said, express those types of things, and yeah.
So what's changed your perspective then? Because I grew up in a similar environment, right, where people didn't talk about mental health. You kind of just sucked it up, right? You wanted to be strong.
Yeah.
So you grew up in an environment like that. So what changed? Like, because it sounds like your approach as a coach is different than that.
So what changed with me, or what changed with?
Yeah, with you, and then what made you decide that, I am going to talk about this, and I am going to have a different way of dealing with this?
Yeah, well, I think there's two different levels to it, and personally, because, and I hope I'm explaining myself right here, but
You're doing a great job.
Okay, in regards to mental health for an athlete and a mindset and what it takes to be, I guess, the best you can be, I think personally I was able to achieve that for the most part. But, outside of that, there's still some things, personally I struggle with, and I try to cope with.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously just like everything, some days are better than others. And, like I said, thankfully, personally, I have somewhat of a foundation there to fall back on, to kind of help me reset. Right. But, again, I come from that generation where you have to sort of figure it out yourself, right? And maybe that's, again, good in some ways, but also maybe not so good, because I feel like, even me personally, I'm not as open about my mental health or anything like that. But again, thankfully, I was able to have that foundation to hopefully help me deal with it. And then the next level is, how can I maybe add on to using my support networks, like, more often? My mom, my dad, my family, close friends, even my kids now. My kids are great as they get older. Your kids are probably the most honest people with you, right? Sometimes.
Yeah, unfortunately, I find that my kid is a little bit too honest with me.
Yeah.
What's been your experience with kids? Because kids, I have a 10-year-old, and I'm finding that they learn all sorts of stuff about mental health now, in school, and they talk about emotional regulation and how they're feeling.
Yeah.
And again, in our generation when we were growing up, people didn't, there wasn't really a language around that. So what's it been like being a dad and having kids where they are growing up in a different environment?
Yeah, they're growing up in a different environment. They keep me up to date on stuff and sort of mentor me in a way. It's almost like a two-way street, because as they grow up, obviously I've had similar experiences that they're going through, so I can help mentor them through things. And again, it's a two-way street. And the fact that they're growing up in an environment, hopefully like this, where it's created by people like you, people like everybody.
You should take
here.
some credit too.
Huh?
You're creating this world right now.
Yeah,
so
it's true.
Take some
it's
credit.
True. So they can hopefully be open about this, and we try to encourage that. And they get it's almost like a culture that's being created around them, whether it's, again, in this environment here, whether it's at school, whether it's through general media, right? It seems like they're, again, hopefully embracing that and able to cope with it, not only through themselves and having a foundation, but also through other sources outside of the home and things like that.
So you have a neat perspective on the next topic I want to talk about, which is the media and online.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about pressure earlier, right? And it just seems like these days, because the media is always switched on, social media is always there, and there's just so much criticism and vitriol sometimes online, right? Like a lot of negativity, some positive stuff too, for sure.
Yeah.
But some negativity, and so you have this unique perspective because you're a coach and you're a dad.
Yeah.
Like, how do you help your players? How do you help your kids even deal with all the stuff that goes on online? Like this added pressure, this added weight from that.
Yeah, we just, me and my wife try our best to help them understand what it is, and I don't even know if I grasp fully what it is, but I at least try to give my
I'm working on it
my
too.
insight. I always say a picture tells 1,000 words, right? And, when you look at a video or a picture of something on social media, especially like when it relates to the soccer environment, because my son is a player, and he aspires to be a professional player one day, right? So if he sees a video of, a player scoring a goal and his name being in the highlights, in those social media posts or whatever, right? I think sometimes, and this probably relates to a lot of the kids as well, they feel that pressure because it's almost like, oh, he's scoring, his name's out there in the media, he's getting the hype. What am I doing? I got to get that. I got to achieve that. I got to get that right now, And I guess, again, we go back to the process, right? And taking it for what it is, helping him understand that, okay, first of all, that's somebody else's life. That's somebody else's path. That's somebody else's doings, right? That they're trying to do. Okay, you need to find your path, right, and find your process within everything, right, and control what you can control within that. And again, with social media, we try to get them to understand that sometimes it's a total different reality, right? Again, a picture tells 1,000 words. Right, it's not the actual reality of what's going on. Maybe somebody interprets that one post a different way than another one interprets it, right? And I think they have to understand the context of what's going on in these social media posts and everything that's going on there, right? And understand that, okay, there's another reality outside of what's going on in the social media reality.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I feel like I'm a little bit vague at times, but
well,
I don't know if I'm explaining myself the right way.
It actually goes back to an earlier thing you said, right? Like, it's not just about the end goal, right? It's almost like, in a way, you're saying that social media post that's just the end part, right? Like, you don't know all the steps that led up to that.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you're saying, like, for young players, sometimes there's an added pressure from what they're seeing online to, like, perform, to meet that standard. And I guess in a way you're saying, like, well, first you got to take each step at a time, right? You still got to focus on your day to day. You still have to focus on your path, and everyone's paths. Sounds like you're saying everyone's path's different.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own kind of unique path, and I guess as a coach, you help them figure that out.
Yes.
Get to where they need to be.
Yes.
Do you think that there's enough support, like mental health support, for players these days, for people in high level sport?
I think there is, but I think sometimes that comes down to the individual and how open they want to be about it.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to the connectivity too, and who each person connects with. So I definitely think the resources are there. It's just a matter of the person taking the initiative.
Yeah.
Right, and feeling open enough and comfortable enough to take the initiative to reach out to support networks outside of themselves.
Yeah. Well, something important I think you're alluding to there too is, like, one size does not fit all, right? Like, different people are at different places when it comes to mental health. Like, some people might be really comfortable talking about mental health. Other people, like, maybe that's not an easy thing for them to deal with, right? And so you got to kind of meet them where they're at. I noticed that this team has a team psychologist. Like, so can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, what was the motivation for having a team psychologist, and what did they add to the team?
Yeah, I think it's just becoming normal within the sports environment, in my opinion. Yeah, the psychological part is a big part of performance as a player and a person, right? And I think you know you heard the old cliche statement that 99% of making it is mental, right?
Yeah.
99% of
So is that
being,
true? I've heard that too. Is that true?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't know what percent, if exact, but it's definitely a big part of making it as a player, right? Again, finding the right mindset, knowing how to cope with the pressures, right? Is huge. It's huge, you know. So absolutely believe that, you know, the mental part is a big part of the sports environment,
Yeah.
right? And making it as a player.
So having a psychologist is certainly like a huge support, right? That's a really meaningful way to show that you're supporting people's sort of mental game. Like, can you think of other ways that, you know, to support people's mental health as well?
Yeah, I think finding methods to cope with the ups and downs of mental health, right?
Like, how do you do it in your life? Like, when you're like, if because you had a 15-year career playing professionally, so I'm certain that you had your ups and your downs.
Yeah.
So how'd you deal with the downs? How'd you overcome those?
The downs, man, just first of all, having like I guess a proper reflection time. Like
Yeah.
if I had a down moment, okay, let's say I had a bad game, or let's say I'm not trending well in a certain way, okay, just making sure I'm taking the time to reflect on everything. Make sure I'm taking the time to watch video, making sure I'm taking the time to utilize my resources within the environment, to kind of see what I'm missing, right? See what I need to add to my game, or to my routine, right, or to my regimen. And yeah, I think yeah, for me, prayer is powerful. You know, whether it's a meditation, whether it's affirmations, whatever it is, you know, I think if you put that into your world, like whatever you want to achieve, you know, I think on some level it can become your reality, right? Obviously, you know, there's a process there. There's steps you take to achieve it, and you know, you're not going to achieve everything you want to, right? But if you're putting an honest effort there, you're putting energy into it, I think to some level you will move towards that direction that you want to get to.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
It does. And you know, again, like you've again reinforced that importance of having having spirituality in your life. It means prayer for you. Like, that's, I think I've heard that a lot from my patients as well. Like everyone needs something, some type of support. Sometimes it's family, sometimes it's prayer, sometimes it's spirituality. But there needs to be something,
Yeah.
to help them get through when things are really rough, really tough, really rough.
Yeah.
You know, can you tell me about a time in your life when like things were particularly hard, and you got through it?
I would say, man, probably towards the end of my playing career. You know, there was a point in my career where, you know, I was 36, 37 at the time, right? And I've been with one club for a very long time, right? And based on the decisions the club wanted to make, whether it's going with younger players, whether it's a new coach coming in, you know, you kind of feel like, and they, you know, you find out that they want to go another direction, right? And you know, for a younger player, you know, it's easier, I would say, more times than not, to relocate, right, or to go to another location, or make a change just like that, right? But when you get older, you have, you know, for me personally, I had kids. They were settled. They were in a routine, right? Then you get to the point where, okay, do I retire, right, and stay in my comfortable situation, right? Or do I relocate and move because there's another opportunity, right? And then what do I do then, right? Do I leave my family in the place I was at and go by myself? Do I take my family with me? So those are decisions I had to make towards the end of my soccer career that were a little bit stressful in some moments, not only for me but for my family in general. So I was around 36, 37, ended up deciding to carry on with my career, and moved from Houston to Columbus, to be specific, right? Spent 2 years in Columbus. Actually ended up leaving my family in Houston, right? The kids were settled with school, with activities. I didn't know if I'd retire and then come back. I didn't know if I'd play for 1 or 2 more years. So there were so many what ifs to the situation, right? And within that, this you're away from your family, you're away from your kids. You're not you feel like you're not able to be the influence you were by being with them day to day when I was back in Houston, right? So that was a stressful and challenging moment for me and my family, and we did our best to cope. We tried to make the most out of the situation. Come the summertime, okay, everybody's moving up, during that 3-month time when the kids are out of school. During spring break, during the breaks that the kids have in school, right? We bring the family up. We try to make the most out of the situation, right? And I think at the end of the day, we're glad we did that. It was a tough time, but I think personally I got through it. Personally, or as a family, we got through it. And I think when we reflect on it, we actually grew as people. Whether we made mistakes in the moment, whether things were perfect or could have been better or weren't as good in moments, we learned from it and we grew through it. And I think it made us better as people. It made me better as a person, and it made us better as a family. And it made us realize that, to be honest, that we would never do that again.
Fair enough.
If some opportunity comes up for my career, we all move together, right? And I think we had to go through that moment to grow as people, right? For hopefully for the betterment for us as a family for the long term. But with that, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit.
Not at all.
I think it's a higher purpose, right? Because I ended up going to Columbus and meeting some great people, right, that are still in my life, that are actually helping me along my career. So if I hadn't made that move, right, then I would have potentially missed out on opportunities for me and my family. So I think that's part of it too, is that there's a blessing in everything. If something doesn't go your way, all right, what's the perspective, right? What's the positive in the situation? And I think that mindset helps push things along, in things I do and things we do.
Well, you're reminding me of something we talk about a lot in mental health. We call it growth mindset, and you are living it, right? Like, you had a tough decision to make about whether to move or not. You made that decision, and even though you're telling me right now that you probably would have done it differently, at the same time you're also talking about all the positives. Like, you learned, you grew, your family grew. You learned more about your preferences as a family, but you also met some great people that continue to be in your life. Like that's the epitome of growth mindset, and that's so important actually for mental health. The opposite of growth mindset is a scarcity mindset, and that's when you're like basically always worried that like any decision you make is going to be wrong, and you're focusing on the negative, and you're kind of feeling like it's all or nothing. Whereas I feel like your attitude is more about like, hey, what can I learn from this? How can we grow as this, even as a family, which I think is awesome. That I'm so glad you shared that example. That's a great example, I think, of a tough situation that you guys figured out what to do, and then you grew as a family. How old are your kids now?
Oh, my kids are 14 and 16.
14, 16. Oh, everyone that has teenagers through the pandemic should get a medal. I personally feel that way because like it's been a challenging couple of years that people have lived through.
Yeah.
Final question: if there was something that you could share with the audience today about mental health, something important that you think about mental health, what would that be?
Something I could share about mental health.
Yeah, either share about
Yeah.
mental health or something about mental health. Maybe something that you've learned in your storied career, like or something you've experienced in your
Yeah,
family.
I would say, um, yeah, for me personally, again, it was about finding methods for coping, right? Finding
Yeah.
methods for coping, big thing. Um, you know, maybe it's, maybe it's working out, you know. Um, Personally, I was able to be introduced to yoga.
Mhm.
I think it's about 15 years ago,
Yeah.
right? And I found huge benefits to that, right? And I always say it's not for everybody. I've tried to put people onto it, and it's just not for them, But um, uh, other people have chosen to incorporate it in their lifestyle, right?
Yep.
And for me personally, it's been a big benefit, man, in dealing with just life in general, and hopefully staying balanced and doing my best to have a healthy mind, right?
Yeah.
And again, nothing's ever perfect, but I do notice that if I need a reset or if I do need a moment where I need to sort of, collect myself, um, get in the right mind frame, get in the right mindset, that does help me cope, and I've tried to incorporate that in my lifestyle on a regular basis. So,
I think that's a lovely note to end on, right? Like, so you have found yoga has been one of your ways to cope and to improve your mental health, and that's like I've found that's been helpful for a lot of my patients. And then, everyone's a little bit different. I've had patients that like mindfulness meditation. I've had patients that love going for a run, or doing something athletic, because that's what like is their jam and helps them with their mental health. And I've had people like go see a therapist or have a life coach or talk to family members. Some people you've talked about spirituality a lot today, which I think is really critical for a lot of people too. So I think that's a great note to end on, to talk about needing something. Everyone needs something to support their mental health. So my name's Dr. Matthew Chow. I'm a physician. I'm Chief Mental Health Officer at TELUS Health. I've just interviewed Ricardo Clark, Whitecaps Football Club second team head coach, and just a lovely human being, an awesome human being that's been through a lot and helps a lot of young players reach their full potential every single day. Just my gratitude to you for sharing your story and sharing your thoughts about mental health today.
Mm-hmm.